Hi, my name is Beth Azor, and I own shopping centers in South Florida. And this is my podcast, I Own a Shopping Center, Now What? So today's episode, I'm going to speak to you about tenants who come to you looking for rent assistance. So since COVID in South Florida, we've had very, very little of that because we've had a population boom and we don't have enough space, aka supply. So if a tenant came to any one of us landlords, we probably would say, respond with, when are you moving out? So for right now, that's not, I think, an issue in probably any of the Smile states. But I know I have heard recently from a client in Chicago, in the outskirts of Chicago, and he is having these calls. So here was my advice to him. So the first things first is, what do you know about the tenant and the tenant's business? So the first thing I do, if a tenant called and said, my business is down, I may have to close my doors unless I get help from you, the landlord. First of all, in my mind, what I'm screaming in my head is, I'm not your partner, buddy. But if I had 30% vacancy, the last thing I want is another tenant to move out, right? I don't want to create more vacancy, because the more vacancy you have, the harder it is to lease up, and certainly lease up at the rents you want, right? The more vacancy you have, the lower your rents go. So the first thing I want to do is say to them, I have what I call a rental assessment application. And feel free to DM me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, and I can send you a copy of this. But basically, it's the credit app you use to qualify in a new tenant and for a new lease. I want to do a credit check. I want the tenant's sales, his existing sales, and his sales for as long as he's been a tenant. So if it's a 5-year lease and this is his 3rd year, I want his sales monthly for the last 3 years, so I can see, has he always had a challenge? Is it something recent? I had a nail salon that was doing $2.4 million in 2,400 square feet, just a phenomenal success. And then he went and opened 3 locations within 5 miles, and he stopped being the manager at the store, and his sales dropped to 1.8. So he caused his own problem. It's 1.8 on 2,400 square feet. It's still a phenomenal success of a tenant for a nail salon, but it was a huge drop in sales for him, and obviously for my property, because, a lot less people going into that nail salon, but still a big success. It just was less for that store. So by the way, he never asked me for any rental assessment. I'm just saying that sometimes tenant sales drop for their own doing. And I think that's important that you know that. So giving them, saying, I have a rental assessment application, please fill it out. And my rental assessment committee, a committee of 1, we will review it. My partners, my lenders, you can always defer to include other people if you want, and we'll evaluate it and get back to you. And about, I would say 75% of the time, they never fill that out, and they stop crying or calling you for help, because it's basically you're asking for their firstborn. You want to pull a credit check. You want their monthly sales since they've been a tenant. You want to know what kind of help they want and how would they use the help. So do you want a 30% reduction on rent for 6 months, and this is what you're going to do with that money? What's their strategy or their plan to increase their sales? Because rent is a function of sales, and they have to have a plan to increase their sales and not just put the money in their pocket. They say, well, I'm paying rent out of my pocket. Well, yeah, that's what entrepreneurship is all about, right? So if the landlord helps you and you, the landlord, don't say you have to use this money to help increase the sales, they're moving out anyway. You're not doing anything to help them. So by having them fill out the rental assessment application, and then get a P&L, you want to know what their expenses are. right? Are their sales down 30%, but they're still taking the same salary they did from day one? So you want, like I said, everything in their firstborn. And when they see that, a lot of times the request goes by the wayside. For the rare times that they actually fill out the information, most of the time they don't give you all of the information, but on the rare times that they do give you all of the information to where you can make a decision, you should take that seriously, because that for them to fill out this application takes a lot of time. It's a lot of personal information. That must mean they're very desperate to have put in the time and given you and gone through the exercise. So now it's incumbent upon you to decide, okay, is my shopping center 100% full? And I don't care if they move out. Is my shopping center 40% occupied? And it would be terrible if they moved out, right? Do they bring other co-tenants with them? There's so many factors to consider when deciding if you care if they stay or not. So now let's say you care. So if you don't care that they stay, then you can just say, sorry, we're not going to help you. When are you moving out? Right? And maybe they say, well, do you mind if I stay through Christmas and then I'll move out in January? You can work with them on your timing. But in the meantime, you can say that you're going to start showing the space. And once they decide they're moving out, you have to decide what you're going to do about if there's any guarantees. Are you going to just take the security deposit? Are you going to want some sort of lease termination that they can pay out in terms? Are you going to want to sue them? I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios once you decide you're going to let them go and they're going to move out. Okay. And then once you agree, so let's say you agree that they have 2 years left on their lease. You're going to take their 2-month security and you want another 6 months of a termination payment, and you're going to let them pay it after they move out in installments. Then you should document that, and you should say landlord and tenant have agreed that the tenant will move out on January 31st, 2025. And then from February 1st until July 1st, tenant will pay landlord the next number. And then landlord has the right to show the space starting now up until tenant's vacating. Landlord has the right to put a sign in the window or a banner above the space or whatever. But you need to have the right to start marketing the space and showing the space so that you can get at least, hopefully before they move out. But you need to have a document that says they're going to move out, because you don't want to start marketing the space, possibly signing a new lease on the space, and then having them change their mind and say, no, we decided to stay. So once you make a deal that they're moving out and you have a deal on which you agree for them to be moving out, that needs to be documented that in fact, their lease is up and they will be moving out on said date. So you can confidently go sign a lease with someone else. Now, when you do sign a lease with someone else and that someone else is in possession of the space, that lease should be contingent on landlord getting possession of said space, right? Cover yourself, because in case the original tenant holds over and maybe you have to sue them to get them out, you don't want to get sued by the incoming tenant that you are in default because you didn't deliver on time. So that new lease should definitely be contingent on landlord getting possession. Now, let's talk about if you want to keep them and you want to help them. Very important for me is if, let's say, they're paying $3,000 a month in rent, and I'm going to give them 6 months of a $1,500 credit. You can either just do it outright, that their rent drops, and you could put it on the end of the term that you collect it later. But what I like to do is I like to say, I want to meet with them and say, well, what's your plan to improve your sales? And they say, well, I'm going to do Facebook ads. I'm going to do a billboard. I'm going to do bus benches. I'm going to hire a retail consultant. I'm going to hire more staff. I'm going to hire someone to help me merchandise the space. Whatever it is that they're going to do to help improve their business, what I have done is I've said, great, you go do all of that. And if you bring me an invoice for the billboard, or if you bring me an invoice for the Facebook ads, I will either pay that directly to the Facebook people or the billboard people. I would love to reimburse them, but if they're already having cash flow problems, that's probably not practical. But I don't want to pay them because I don't want the money to go in their pocket. So I will pay for the consultant. I will pay for the billboard. I will pay for the Facebook ads up to a max of X. So I will pay $1,500 a month, which is 50% of your rent, for 6 months towards things or tools or consultancies or whatever to help improve your business. And so now I know that my money, hard-earned money, that I am now giving up, hopefully temporarily, that it is going to help improve their business so we can help turn around their business versus just going in their pocket, which will do nothing for me or for the property. So those are some of the tips that I use to when a tenant calls and says, my business is down, I can't pay the rent, what are you going to do to help me partner? Which we're not partners. I also suggest, can you bring in a cosign? Can you bring in someone to help lend you money for the business, right? I've also suggested they do something like that. So there's all kinds of creative ways, but I hope this helped. And if you have any questions, please reach out. And if you want the rental assessment package, reach out and we'll get it to you. And if you like this podcast and it's helping, please share it, tell your friends, subscribe, and all that jazz. Have a great day.